Good afternoon, everybody. My research interests have mainly been in three areas. Earlier in my research career, it was more about structural adjustment of agriculture and farms. I've always been working on dairy supply chain, starting from the economics of dairy farms until the exports, and also contributed to the first dairy strategy of Estonia in 2012. And in recent years, I've also worked more on policy studies and policy evaluations, and probably this is kind of defines or explains how I approach to this large topic of bioeconomy, which is nowadays center of all agricultural and life sciences universities in Baltics. I guess bioeconomy has been defined by previous presentations very well. So what are the key aspects here? It's biomass, conversion, industrial applications, and consumer goods. And as has been explained already, this is also kind of explains the value of these products along the chain. In agriculture and food sector, we are still, at least in Baltic countries, probably working more on this side, on the biomass question as such. Not so much about high-end or high-value-added consumer goods or consumer applications. This is the quite well-known biomass cascade. It's taken from the work from Nordic Council of Ministers, and as also been noted before, energy and heat is the low-value product in the biomass, and pharma and health, but also food and feed are the high-value-added products. My presentation is actually part of the Interreg Baltic Sea Region project, Baltic Biomass for Value. And in this project, we are mainly focusing on the bioenergy part. And this has been causing some internal discussions among the project team that if we know this cascade, and we know that higher value is in the top of the pyramid, why are we dedicating so much attention to the bottom of this pyramid and bioenergy questions, which presumably has much less value. However, if we look at the policy discussions now with the Green Deal proposal from the new European Commission, we have to admit that environment and climate debate at this point of time is very much related to energy issues. And therefore, I guess it makes sense also to pay attention to this energy question. And as we see or have experience in our project, that for some of the countries in our region, it's still a big issue, and bioeconomy has a very clear role in this. To define a little bit what I will talk about in the presentation, what is business model and business case? So business model is basically a simplified description of how a business functions, how the business is conducted, and how it functions. And it describes the business logic of this organization. How is the value created and how is the value captured from consumers? And business case is a logical and structured argument for implementing some change in the business. When we talk about the bioeconomy and circular bioeconomy, it's clear that our farmers, food industry, other companies in our region need a lot of these business cases as an examples how things can be changed and implemented in their businesses to become more circular and more bioeconomical, let's say. As mentioned, the project mainly focuses on the use of biomass for bioenergy, but we also will look at the side streams and opportunities to produce high value-added products from these side streams. And these high value-added products are mainly related to food. What we do is we just go through again the potential biomass in this region, potential use for this biomass, the examples of business models, business cases. And on the other hand, attention will be paid to local development authorities and local municipalities to help them so that they can help their companies to develop circular bioeconomy. And on the other hand, we have business development organizations like Vidzeme Planning Region or Chamber of Agriculture in Estonia, that are also involved in the project and who could use this knowledge to consult their members and clients. It's a 2.5 years project. We are in the middle of it. We have 17 partners from 8 countries, Baltic countries, Poland, Germany, Sweden, Norway, and Russia. Yep. And for example, from Estonia, we have the Ministry of Rural Affairs, Chamber of Agriculture, and University of Life Sciences. And I think it's quite nice way to bring different actors together in one project, to learn together how to develop bioeconomy. And from Latvia, we have Vidzeme Planning Region and Latvia University of Life Sciences. During the project, we did some brainstorming to map what are actual needs at this point of time in our region regarding the bioeconomy and circular bioeconomy. We very often see that in projects, especially where researchers are involved, the focus is very much on the supply side. So the questions that researchers are interested in to develop. But for innovation to be adopted, we also need the demand side. And supply and demand need to match to make things happen. So from the demand side, what we have mapped by now is that, for example, in Norway and Germany, there is a need for increased use of biomass for heat production. In Lithuania, in existing biogas stations, there is potential to use more heat. It's underutilized. It's produced but not used enough, for example. In Estonia and also in Lithuania, we see that the existing biogas stations are converting to biomethane production. This is mainly due to the policy change and the climate targets in the transport sector. It's clear that there is need for substitution of plastics. There are two bigger topics now. First is food contact materials, which is a sensitive issue also from the food safety side, but also we know that Lithuania is one of the biggest PET bottle producers in Europe. And therefore they are very much interested in this bioplastics and plastic substitution issues. It's clear that we need to use less mineral fertilizers and more organic fertilizers. Biogas, digestate, but also other biomass sources provide quite a lot of opportunities for that. In Estonia, we have, I guess also in Latvia and maybe other countries who have seashore, we have actually need or ambition to add more value to our fisheries and aquaculture products. Also, countries with the timber industry are looking for opportunities to add more value. Because as we learned before the lunch, timber or wood is a high value biomass source, which very often has low value use. And for example, in Germany and Poland, there is big issue with replacing coal with other fuels, solid fuels. And in Estonia, we have still significant part of the electricity produced from oil shale, which gives us a very big carbon footprint per capita, one of the largest in Europe and in the world, actually. So we need to do something about it, and bioeconomy can play a role here. Another side is biomass potential. So in all countries, there is biomass that is not yet used. So there is potential. We have straw and biomass from permanent grasslands that is underused, definitely in Baltic countries. Still manure and cultivated biomass is underused for biogas production. In Estonia, we only have total 17 biogas stations, and just 5 of them are agricultural. So there is a lot of potential there. Biodegradable waste that the municipalities collect is largely unused. Also, biodegradable waste for retailers, food industry, unused. Waste for forest and timber industry in Germany and Sweden has potential. We don't grow too much fast-growing energy plants. side streams from primary processing of fruits and vegetables unused. Some countries are more interested in algae biomass, like Norway, and also side streams from slaughterhouses and other animal waste, which is unused. But this is quite tricky issue because of the regulations and the safety questions. Challenges. We had 2 weeks ago meeting with Estonian farmers regarding the biogas topic and also bioethanol topic. It was also in the framework of this project. And what we learned or experienced during the discussions we had is that I think at least in Estonia, maybe also in Latvia, but not so much in Lithuania, there is a belief that bigger farms are kind of better and more viable. Therefore, it's somehow everybody has a feeling that biogas station is only viable in large farms. And this is not something for medium-sized or small-scale farms. It might be true, maybe not. Maybe it's just the issue of low value of this product that we think that big scale is needed. But definitely there are a lot of actors in small and medium-sized farms, companies who are interested, but who somehow are in doubt whether this is doable with their scale. And one option is to cooperate, but this needs some social change. It's not just question of technology and economics. It's also a social question. There's also demand for community-based solutions, more cooperation and collaboration. Cooperation and collaboration, at least in Estonia, is not so easy topic, even now, 30 years after the beginning of transition. Cooperation is something that is often associated with the old Soviet-type collective farms. But we see that generational change is happening and next generation is more open for that. Since the bioeconomy examples, at least in Estonia nowadays, are still very subsidy dependent, let's say so. So in most of the cases they have used investment subsidies, and in biogas and electricity and heat they also have operating subsidies. So this is something that is driving this business models. So predictable and stable policy is needed. In Baltic states with quite rapid development, 12 years guarantee of subsidies, for example, is I think already considered quite extensive and long-term. We are not used to that long-term planning, but for this we need more long-term plans. There are a lot of regulatory restrictions regarding use of different types of biomass. What we see is that these restrictions are different in different countries. For example, if you can use the residues or waste from slaughterhouses, in what kind of digesters and what can you do with the digestate. It's not all the same in all countries. So these really need to be addressed if we want to use this source. And it has been mentioned a couple of days ago by my more experienced colleague who has worked on business modeling, that business model canvases of bioeconomy examples have very, let's say, shallow right-hand side. I will show you in a minute what it means, but it means that the biggest challenge actually is not to produce something from biomass, but to sell the products and to cooperate between the companies. So in our project we took bottom-up approach on the business models. We started from 58 examples or business cases, existing companies or startups, and clustered them to 12 groups to make some generalizations. And the categories we used are listed here. So it's source of biomass, type of product, environmental benefits, type of enterprise, social and regional benefits, policy aspects, and type of business. Yeah, so this is the intermediary product. Here are 58 companies, their characteristics evaluated by the group, and the clusters that were created as a result of this exercise. But I don't want to stick here because we can discuss about these things for maybe an hour if you go into details, but this is not the place for this. I just want to briefly introduce you 4 of these clusters. So they represent kind of typical bioeconomy examples in these regions. So first one is cluster 3. Probably you see some familiar companies here, names of the companies. But these mainly use cultivated biomass or agricultural residues. They are working in food and drinks, but also other bio-based products. Their environmental benefits are related to landscape preservation, also soil quality improvement and purification cleaning. And type of enterprise 3 more important keywords are innovation and knowledge company, processing company, and distributor. If you think about the typical agricultural producer or food producer, then this innovation and knowledge is quite important here, because this is not maybe typical for all farmers or food companies. And also the distribution is quite important because you need to be able to sell it. In general, all these business models are socially acceptable, no problems with this. So bioeconomy as such looks socially very desirable. And of course, it's sustainability oriented, profit oriented, but also diversified business models that we see here. And it's also circular bioeconomy examples, and it's also novel. So these are the main keywords in this cluster. So this is the business model canvas. It's classical, it's Osterwalder and Pigneur, and it just helps you understand the business model. So it lists key partners, key activities, resources, cost structure, value proposition, and on the right-hand side, it's customer relationships, customer segments, channels, and revenue streams. And as I mentioned earlier, the observation of my colleague is that most of the bioeconomy examples or business models are really lacking information on this side, because this is the tricky part if we want to make this transformation for typical rural businesses to bioeconomy thinking and bioeconomy businesses. So we really need to work more on customer side, on distribution channels, and also the revenue streams is a tricky issue due to the subsidy dependence. It's a little bit more with resources and investments, machinery, technology, etc. Okay, so key components of these business models. As innovation is important here, research partners, business associations, and also biomass producers who provide raw materials are necessary. And we see that companies here have very good relationships with the suppliers of biomass, and this is sort of partnership that they have, maintain, and develop. Key activities: sourcing of raw material, processing, marketing, and sales, also to export markets, networking with researchers, technology providers, and other market members. Resources are quite conventional. In addition, knowledge and human resources are important. Value that is offered is ingredients for other products, also organic products, and high value added products from side streams. And also use of all side streams for something else as well, as biogas, fertilizer, and also providing some services to other companies. Customers, mainly business to business, a lot of private labeling, and other companies use the products of these companies as ingredients in their products. Customers is mainly food industry, also supermarkets, other distributors, channels, export manager, distributors in export markets, sales manager, also trade fairs, local distributors. So this kind of business models really requires a lot of work on the selling side and exporting side. So you need to work with these relationships. It's not just producing something. Cost structure is quite conventional, cost of processing, plant, etc., but also costs related to maintaining your channels and export managers. And revenue stream is mainly from sales of products. So subsidies are not so important here, but very important is your customers and distribution channels. And one example from me here is Latvian company Aloja Starkelsen. I heard that it will be introduced in the next is it panel discussion? Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not going into details here because we have people here who know everything about this company. But yep, so it's one of the leading organic potato starch producers in the world. So wide range of products. And as I understand, they're looking for new uses of all kind of ingredients that can be extracted from potato and pulp and etc. So next case, also quite typical. It's typical agricultural biogas production. So they use manure, agricultural residues to produce either liquid fuel, electricity or heat. And the main environmental benefit is substitution of fossil-based resources. Also, digestate can be used for soil improvement as a fertilizer substitute, and it's quite important for farmers to reduce their air pollution because of the smell, but also because of the in the future requirement to reduce ammonia emissions. So, primary producer in Estonian case very often in partnership with either external investor or distributor of gas. Yep, and this is something that is quite easily transferable to other countries. It's not so tricky a business model that can't be copied or transferred. Key partnerships here: biomass providers, also gas filling stations, and industrial consumers, but also in Estonian cases owners of these companies. Key activities: collection of manure, production of biogas, cleaning of biogas to biomethane, etc. Yep. And what we see in Estonian case is that this industry is now changing because of the policy. So they're going from heat and power production to biomethane production. And this change is not driven by market, but this is policy driven. And this is where the stability of the policy becomes very important. If you know the future payments for 5 years, you make one kind of decisions. If you have security for 12 years, 15 years, the decisions will be a little bit different, and also the actors who will be engaged in this kind of production will be different. So this is very subsidy dependent example. And we have a example from the middle of Estonia, biomethane. It's a large dairy farm with 1,500 cows. They produce biomethane. They have their own filling station, and they sell also to food industry that use biomethane instead of natural gas. The next example is companies who use cultivated plant-based biomass, also forestry biomass. Their products are biochemicals or nutraceuticals. It's very much innovation related. Very often they cooperate with universities or spin-offs of universities, or cooperate with research institutes. And products are very novel, very high value added, and definitely circular bioeconomy. The problem here is that very often it's unclear if this is scalable into the actual business, because the revenue is very unsure. So they are just in the development phase. It's more about technology at this stage, not actually functioning business. And the business potential still needs to be demonstrated for the investors. And example here is plant protein factory from Sweden, which is company where also Swedish Agricultural University is involved in. And the final one is a typical large-scale agricultural producer who is also processing its product to customer products, like a milk producer who has its own dairy. They're producing biogas. They use this heat and power to fuel their processing plant. They're open to customers. It's also visitors' farms. And they want to make the full cycle and definitely want to be circular. And the value proposition that they offer is high quality food produced in a sustainable way. And there are examples, I guess, in most of the countries, also from Latvia, Estonia, but what we chose for here is one from southern Sweden. It's Vapnö farm, one of the largest dairy farms in Sweden, who have their own milk processing plant, who produce biogas, use this heat and power to fuel the plant. They have reduced the bought energy by 90%, and it's also open for consumers. They have farm shop restaurants, etc. So good example of this kind of business. And I guess my time is up. So conclusions. Bioeconomy, it's both old and new concept. In essence, there is, if we leave aside the very high-tech new technologies that are applied, many of the things are actually quite well known. Why we could or should think about it is that it helps us to see agriculture and food sector as part of the solution of the challenges that we have now. And working with these example business models and cases is maybe worthwhile because it helps you learn what can be done, what others are doing. It's an eye-opener and stimulate new ideas for application. And what is tricky or critical is we see that a lot of these business models are still subsidy dependent, and policy is never stable. It always will change every once in a while. And it's also knowledge and innovation intensive activity. In Europe, there's very prominent concept of AKIS, Agricultural Knowledge and Innovation System. It's not so well known in Estonia and Latvia, but maybe it's time to convert this agricultural knowledge and innovation system directly to bioeconomy knowledge and innovation system, and skip the AKIS part in Baltic countries and go to the BIKIS concept. If you are interested about the other results of the project, our web page is here, and I guess you will find also the slides later in the conference page. So thank you very much.
Thank you.